So for a while now I've been promising a video of how to make your own winter bicycling pogies, and today I'm going to do that. You can see I've got my pattern here, and it's just an election sign that I've cut into the shape of my pogie, and it's about the size I find works best for most adults. Got a rotary cutter. I just run around the outside. I've got my fleece here folded in half, and I just run around the outside. I have my fold on the outside edge of the fleece. You can see my cutter is kind of dulled. Nothing is harder on a rotary cutter than fleece, as far as I can tell. You can see I've cut into my pattern so I can get right into the corner there when I'm cutting my fabric. You can do this with scissors as well. Then you just go ahead and, after you've got this cut out, you make a second one and then move on to the next step. So now that I've done all my cutting out of the parts, I'm just laying these pogies out here so that I can sew them together. So what I've done is I've taken the two inside layers. Now it's hard to see because this is all a lot of black fleece, but I've got my inside layers here that I cut out, folded in half, and I've got those with the insides facing each other. This is the side of the fleece that I want to have next to my hands. And then the next piece just sits right on top of that, and it has the outsides facing each other. And then after I sew them together, I'm just going to flip the outside part inside out so that the pogie itself, I'll end up with this red checkered pattern on the outside, which is what I want for this particular pair. These are a sort of custom pair. Ordinarily I'd have nylon on the outside and the fleece on the inside. And then I've laid out the other one, mirror image, so that when I put my welting on the side here to stiffen it up, that they'll both be on the same side relative to each other. So here we go with the using heavy machinery part of this. When you're working with sewing machines, I always recommend using a pair of safety glasses. I've just got the fabric lined up exactly how I showed it in the previous video. I've turned it over because I'm running the sewing machine with my fabric on the left to make it easier. The opening is on the right there, and that's about it. I'm just gonna do some sewing, back stitch a bit to lock it in place, and then just feed it in there. As you can see, I've got a Sailrite walking foot machine, and it has a lot of advantages. The big advantage to this guy is the walking foot. As you can see, the walking foot pulls this super thick, super bouncy fabric in quite nicely and holds it down there while I sew it. As I come around here, I'm just making sure that my far side is lined up and that the end of my seam here is lined up, so that I end up in the same spot on everything. You might ask yourself, why is he sewing that folded over edge? Surely it doesn't need sewing. And you'd be right, it doesn't need sewing, but I find it makes a really nice base for the welting afterwards, which will be my next step. When I used to watch a lot of carpentry shows, I used to get frustrated when the carpenter on the TV show would go over to his, for instance, square hole drilling machine and say, "Here, I'm just going to drill some square holes." Well, I've got a welting foot on my machine, and I've got this piece of welting that I'm just going to sew down to my outside fabric. It is possible to sew welting on even if you don't. What I advise doing is actually taking one of those folded over seams and just sticking a simple piece of wire or a bit of plastic edging down that sewn over seam to stiffen that up a bit if you don't have a welting foot. So once we have this sewn together and the welting sewn on there, what we want to do is turn it right side out so we can put the edge binding tape on. The way we do that was we reach in on our two outside faces, just stick an arm in there, pull everything through, put everything right side out. And we can check our seams, make sure we don't have anything that we missed, any holes. And that's it. Next thing I'd like to do, just to save myself a little trouble trying to fit a bunch of layers into my binding tape, I'm just going to take my Pogie cuff and put it on my free arm machine here. I'm just going to sew this cuff together just so it's an even edge. This isn't really to hold anything in the final piece, just to give me a nice edge. Alright, I'm back with another one of those square hole machine, drilling machine moments, and I've got my binder tape feed here, just swings into my sewing machine. You can get these for a standard machine. They take a little bit of effort to install, but they're well worth it. And then I sew my binder tape on. So now that I'm done sewing this together and I've finished the tape the edges of my seams, I'm going to do the last part. I just put a hole in this, and because I often work with nylon shell on the outside, I've gotten in the habit of using my soldering iron. I just poke a nice neat hole in there, and that gives me the space to put the bar end plug on the end, and that bar end plug will hold it onto the bars. And then I do the same with the second one, where I put a hole in there about the same space, and I put it on the opposite side so that the pairs are a mirror image of each other.